Ba-dum-ba-dum-bum.
All right. So yeah. So Alex. I mean, Alex. He works in the law. He's a lawyer type. I don't even know exactly what kind of lawyer he
A
is.
lawyer type.
He's just a lawyer. Yeah. I don't know.
Well,
Vodka.
Guy knows about the
Lawyering
law.
things.
Yeah, he's so obviously when it comes to all this stuff, he's well, Steven, you start when it comes to this because you're more in the know than
Well,
I am, and I've had some vodka.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure if Alex is able to jump on, he'll be able to explain.
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of
He
it,
said he
but-
will when he can. So once he
Yeah.
does, I'll pop him in. So
But he's a
yeah, what type of
he
lawyer?
works in law, but he's got a strong background and a lot of experience in IP law. And so as a result, especially because he's like a superhero fan, so not only does he know like a lot of the like trademark copyright related stuff, but also that has a lot of kind of spider webs out into other areas, or he just has the legal background to be able to look up read legal documents, which is a thing that not a lot of people can do. And so it's been really interesting talking to him as this all develops about like, we're talking about police reports, we're talking about restraining orders, we're talking about jurisdictions and different states or islands or reserves or whatever.
Oh God, he must have had
And-
a field day with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp then, huh?
I didn't talk to him as much about that, but I'm sure, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff there that like to learn where like, there's the layer of like, oh, let's watch the trial and see how they talk about Hollywood, and then there's like, oh, let's talk about like legal, like how do contracts work? Like, what's the reality of the situation when we're talking about like contracts in Hollywood and like what is people owed, and etc. Yeah,
That's him. Geek Law.
Oh.
Geek Law grad.
but yeah, definitely a good follow. Yeah, the really interesting thing about the Ezra Miller thing, I think the entire time, like from the beginning, is it's a really interesting situation of like, I think to start off, because the last time we got onto because things were kind of developing when we were talking about it last time, we got into this really kind of weird space of like, are we defending what happened or are we saying it didn't? And like, I think taking a step back even further about that is there seems to be a big misconception about like what the fuck even happened at all. Because there's what was really interesting experience for me as this whole thing played out was like something would happen and like it would get reported in the news and then regurgitated on social media. And so like for me, the natural reaction is always like, okay, so let's look at the police report. What does that say? Where did this originate from? So I think for a little bit of background on everyone, when this stuff, when a police report is made, the sheriff or the police, whatever the legal entity jurisdiction will send local news affiliates just like a PDF dump every morning or every weekday morning, and on it it's just like all of the arrests or all of the
New name
incidents
for a band, by the way, PDF dump.
I like it.
It's going on the list.
from the day before, and then the local news usually goes through it and they look for like what's going to make the best headline, what's going to do well on Facebook, what's going to get the most clicks, all that stuff, and then they take it and they write it. And a lot of times, because they don't have local news does not have the resources to like go ask the cops for explanation on things or go look at the road, ask eyewitnesses. The very first report about that comes out is always basically just a regurgitation of the police report. And standards are usually pretty low on that too, where it's like borderline, if not outright plagiarism, because it's not like it's not, you're not copying another news source. You're just saying like, whatever, but you have to be careful to when you do it to say like, according to the police, so and so allegedly did XYZ, and that a lot of times that gets lost in translation. And even if the paper covers their basis without saying like explicitly taking the side of the cop or explicitly reporting the version of events from the police report as fact, there's even the people reading it aren't necessarily going to know the difference between them saying according to the police, so and so allegedly, whatever.
Reading comprehension sucks.
And even then, this is not an issue of guilt. This is an issue of they have been picked up with this claim, and there will be a trial where they will determine more of these things later on, etc. And so, what was really weird to me was this first report comes out about Ezra. I think the first one was disorderly conduct or something at a bar. This is another area where Alex is going to be good because he knows the whole timeline. But and so it talks about taking a microphone from someone doing karaoke and doing all this other stuff. But the narrative got out of hand with like, it was reported So the story got picked up because what happens is the local news gets this police report. They say, oh, hey, a celebrity did something in our area. Let's write it up. They basically take what's written in the police report, turn it into a 300-word news article, put it up. People follow Ezra Miller because he's a celebrity and they're interested in his role as the Flash. He's coming up in upcoming movies. Someone might have Googled Fantastic Beasts a couple days ago. Google pops it into their news feed. It's like, oh, you Googled Fantastic Beasts. Here's a story about Ezra Miller getting arrested. Everyone reads this regurgitation of a police report about Ezra Miller getting arrested, and now all of the geek news sites have it. And, you know, they're not all lawyers. They're not all even going back to the police report. They're all, because they don't have the police report, unless they know to go look it up on the police's site. They're just reporting the version of events reported by the understaffed local news who regurgitated the police report.
Right. They're going from the secondary source, not the primary source, and then becomes a game of telephone.
Right, exactly. And it quickly evolved to, like, I don't know how many days it was before people were like, Ezra Miller is assaulting people all across Hawaii. And it's like, look,
Yeah. Throwing chairs.
He was arrested and did things that like would be like a misdemeanor for most of them. But it quickly, there was like a couple reports. But then what I kept on noticing on my feeds was like, I'd get new articles would be popping up that it wasn't always clear. Like I lost track of, I'd get a notification. I'd be like, oh, again? And it's like, oh no, he's only been arrested like 2 times. One
Right.
time for like blocking traffic and one time for disorderly conduct is what the accusations were. But like I keep on getting these alerts. And so even for me, who's like going back to the police reports to be like, what actually happened here? It looks like it's been like a whole bunch of times. And so then you got people on Twitter who are like, they're assaulting people left and right all over Hawaii and abusing women and yelling things at people and burning stuff down. It's like that's the provable events are just that, like the only thing we know for a fact is that he was arrested or they were arrested those 2 times. And then the police report says, you know, varying things based on what it was. And not so much to say like there's no guilt or there's no wrongdoing of any kind. Obviously, there was some kind of a scene being caused, so I'm not going to say like that's no big deal. But the evolution of the story like really got out of hand really fast, and at that stage, and then all this other weird stuff started kind of piggybacking on top of that. And because the narrative had been lost with the police reports, because you've got people saying, "Oh, they're just causing havoc in Hawaii," when like they got picked up by the cops 2 times for being obnoxious at a bar is what happened, right? But because you've got this like perception of violence and carnage all across Hawaii from all these different reports, these other claims started to kind of take, people are like more likely to accept this stuff. Whereas if it had come out without the preceding weeks of like controversial stuff, it would have
Steven,
different.
now people are saying your mic is too low.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yes.
Well, okay, because to me it sounds fine. It's like we can't find that medium right there. I don't know. All right, just go up a little bit.
Find your Goldilocks zone.
So
Steve.
do I got to go back to the beginning now? Because I can
No,
start
you're
at-
good. No, you're good.
Okay,
right
so
now.
see, so local news gets this PDF dump of no.
Hey, PDF dump sounds like a great name for a band.
There we go. Okay,
All right, you're good now. I think. Hopefully.
yeah.
Sorry.
No, yeah. So I don't know. I don't want to like go on and on for the whole thing, but like,
But you
So-
will.
Hey,
well, of course, but
If I must.
that's an invitation for anyone to cut me off. But it's been really weird to
We
see
will.
like there's the noise floor has been raised to the point where like someone can be like, oh, Ezra Miller ate a baby, and everyone's gonna be like, oh, how dare they? Whereas like a year ago, if someone had said that, people would have been like, oh, that sounds like fake news. Let's go look at what actually happened. But because there's just this like fracas of
Fracas. I like that
All right,
word.
right.
I like that a
Fracas.
lot.
good word. I like it. That's another band name. Anyways,
Right. Doug, that would be-
With like Metallica, like
PDF
font.
fracas. How about that?
like all kind of
PDF.
jagged stuff, looks like thorns and stuff.
Yeah.
Fracas.
But yeah, and so I don't know, I've been kind of avoiding getting into like the actual specifics so much as like the high level. Like it's really weird reading this where for me every time I go back to look at like, okay, well what happened and what was reported and so you get stuff like even now there's stuff that's like people are saying using the word like kidnapping. And it's like, well, even if you take everything at face value, we're talking about an 18-year-old who isn't even in the same state as Ezra right now, who is posting to their own social media saying I'm fine, and yet like the news is running away with this term kidnapping. And like not to diminish or say that we shouldn't take serious claims seriously, but when that is what the news is reporting, most people aren't going back and looking at like, well, what's actually happening. There's like this image, or they'll say like with authorities are looking for Ezra Miller. It's like, well, no, what the tribal court in this Indian is it on a reservation, or it's an Indian run or a Native American council issued a restraining order against Ezra, and so they're out of jurisdiction. Like this is not an FBI thing. This is
he's on the run, Steven. What are you talking about? He's on the run.
And the
Yes.
only reason that the order was even granted is because according to the Lakota the court's standards or whatever their law system is called, an 18-year-old is like still subordinate to the parents. If that was requested in like a U.S. court, that wouldn't have been granted the same way. So a tribal court creates an order of protection that can only be created for someone within their own jurisdiction because they're older than the age, and then can't serve it to Ezra because Ezra doesn't live in their jurisdiction. And the 18-year-old isn't even with Ezra. They're off with their girlfriend, and then the news is like, oh, authorities can't find Ezra. It's like, well, authorities of what? Like it's like this is not The Fugitive going on here. This is, and
they're actively pursuing him, chasing him down the street.
Yeah, and it's hard to even talk about it
while he's holding an 18-year-old under his arm
because you can't
They can't catch him. He's the Flash.
There's this, yeah, exactly.
I was about to say,
like
that's
going back
kinda why.
to like it's hard to go back to the basics of like, well, what do we know? What was actually planned? What do the records actually show? But no, we're so far off in this. Like, well, no, now they've kidnapped someone and they're on the run from authorities. It's like, whoa, that is so far from the. This isn't to say that nothing wrong has happened and no consequences need to happen. And,
Exactly.
And nobody's responsible and nobody needs to pay. But like, there is a big difference between, dude, you were really obnoxious at that bar in Hawaii and you need to apologize to people, and dude, you got to turn yourself in and surrender the 18-year-old
kid,
kidnapped, like who you groomed for a, like,
Yeah.
and it's one of those things where like, because of the way social media is, that's why this is like so much a better place to have this conversation, because on social media you can't do that because you're like, well, hold on, let's go back to the basics, and all of a sudden it's, oh, you're defending a pedophile, and it's like, no, I'm questioning whether or not there's sufficient evidence to even state that they're pedophile in the first place. There's a big difference between defending it and saying like, whoa, how do we even get to this conclusion? Because the claim is being made by the parents.
Pedophile. People like to throw that word around so loosely.
Yeah, well, because it's
Yes,
a trump card for getting people suspended on Twitter. So it's like people are real quick. They don't care. They just care that
Right.
it's like, oh, that's a buzzword that gets people in trouble.
Even though the people are like of age, isn't she like of illegal age?
Well,
Yeah,
no,
she's
well,
also-
and also, and by the way, because I want to take a moment because I remember Amanda and I have had this conversation before, because I remember listening to Fat Man on Batman, because Kevin Smith has the Wayne Foundation to help sexually abused and sexually trafficked individuals, and yeah, pedophile. The technical definition of that means that you find someone sexually attractive because of their childlike or lack of sexual maturity. So you could be attracted to someone who is underage, but you're technically not a pedophile by the definition if what attracts you to them is if they are well developed. It's not the underdevelopedness that you're sexually attracted to. Be a pedophile, you're attracted by the lack of maturity.
Right.
Gotcha.
Well, and in this case also specifically, it's not even a question. Like pedophilia is like a thing that has been added to it by people on social media. If you take the parents and the claims that are present at face value, the claim isn't that Ezra is a pedophile. The claim is that Ezra groomed this person until they were 18, and then took advantage of the dynamic. Which is not like an okay thing to happen, but there's a big, like, once again, there's a big difference between like that and pedophile, and both are wrong, but like we can start by separating that a little bit, and then you go back and look at like, okay, well, grooming, what is the grooming? Well, they took these The person, the Takata or Gibson, I'm not entirely sure about their identity, so I never know if I'm referring to them correctly. But
it's called Takata. Yeah.
right, but some of the reports then say that they're Gibson, but they're not clear about the pronouns, so I'm just going with my best guess on it. But the parents so first of all, the parents have been trying to put him in a conservatorship, which is like what Britney Spears is under, which is basically power of attorney, total control over their life as an adult. So they've been trying to put Takata in a conservatorship for like months already. This is a legal case that has been going on because Takata left home because of their sexual identity and or orientation, and the parents didn't accept that. And so that's part of how they ended up with Ezra. And like, that's all agreed upon. Like, that's not like speculation, or like, that's like what per the claims of the parents. But then that has been an ongoing thing. And it wasn't until recently that after all of this Ezra stuff came up, then they were like, oh, that Ezra Miller person who's been in the news, who everybody thinks is a bad person. Yeah, they were grooming them. And it's like, why was that not, like, that is a whole claim onto itself. And that doesn't mean that it's not true, but it's like, you'd think you would lead with that if that was like your trump card. How does that kind of arise later? And I know, and Enosh talked to the
Vintage Devil or
Vintage
whatever.
Devil, so you might know more about that than I do. But I don't know. It's just, there's so many. And every time I even talk about it, then I got to take that step back and be like, now, once again, this does not prove that like there's nothing there, but like, let's slowly peel back to like the layers of like, what do we know?
But Stephen, your point is the fact, because I've even talked to Dave about this. It's like, I don't really have an opinion one way or the other, because I've been kind of a casual observer of the headlines and the reactions passing through my timeline. I to your point, that doesn't mean that I don't think something's happened, or I do think something's happened, but I haven't invested. I've had other shit going on, so I haven't invested myself in the information. I've just been watching everyone speak so authoritative. It's social media. It's the social media effect of, I'm going to speak authoritatively about a topic, and it seems to be based entirely on your personal bias regarding the topic, regardless of the facts. And I feel, and what Stephen is trying to say in a very neutral way is, we're not saying something did or did not happen, that something is right and or wrong. It's just, on social media, there seems to be this allergy to someone going, hey, can we just kind of like pump the brakes and find out what's going on? That doesn't mean that something is right or wrong. Scott, that doesn't mean that I don't think that something's right or wrong. It just means I want the full picture.
Yes,
exactly.
And you can't say that though, Scott, because then people immediately, like Steven said, they automatically, if you say that, you are somehow defending and claiming the innocence of Ezra Miller, even though there's like loads of, you can have, I don't know, maybe be a YouTuber that has hours of things that say to the contrary to that, but it's still, then your name gets dragged right in the mud with it, and all of a sudden you become a sympathizer.
Well, and then what I've even brought up too when it comes to this is like, now it's let's face it, when it comes to media, there's left media, there's right media, there's all, and it's reached the
media has become very personalized.
Yes, it really has.
Media that says what you want to say.
And what has happened in like the past week and stuff like that is like, it's gotten to conservative media, and they really like to use that word groomer with certain things. And regardless of how you feel about certain things that are happening in the world when it comes to grooming, and I totally understand that, and that's a whole other discussion. But at the same time, it's like, oh well, we have this buzzword. And of course, they see that, it's like, all right, now it's reached over here. It's starting to get a little bit like, oh shit. Now they're just going like, he's a monster, he's a predator, he must be stopped, and blah blah blah. And then we're still just going, hey, wait, we still got to get all the information here before we start.
Public enemy number one, but he's still being allowed to just run free. But that's right, because that's because they don't know where he's at.
Well, it's like I keep on. I know when I was on Enosh's show, I said this like a million times, but it's never about what it's about. And so like I think what Dave just pointed out is a really good example of that. Of like, you've got this started as like the people who were aware of it because they had some sort of a connection to Ezra Miller, and so the algorithms said, "Hey, this small local newspaper in Hawaii regurgitated this police report you might be interested in because it mentions this person you have Googled or tweeted about or Googled something ancillarily related to them. Here you go." And then once that kind of made that leap into the like fandom zone on Twitter, it was exclusively used as fuel for like you'll find a pretty common, like you're not going to find anybody who like has mocked the way Ezra Miller runs and hates Zack Snyder and thinks the Snyder Cut should have been restored, who is also saying like, hey, I think this guy is great, let's pump the brakes to find out what's going on. In the same way that you're not going to find any like most hardcore, well, hardcore Snyder fan is even a hard way to phrase it, but like you're not going to find like people who have been traditionally fans of Ezra saying like, oh no, they're totally guilty. Mostly like 95% of the time, all of this is just fuel for whatever your beef is. Don't restore the Snyderverse, or even like it's a weird like toxic tornado of like people that don't want the Snyderverse restored or like, oh, look at this kills the Snyderverse. And at the same time, you've got people who think the Flash movie needs to die because it destroys the Snyderverse, are like, look, now the Flash movie can't happen. And we can, and it's just like this, like it's just a pawn for people who don't actually care about the Ezra situation.
Right. And then also, and something that I've seen some people bring up is whenever you see pictures of them associated with these stories, it's also very telling what images of them get used to highlight whatever spin the story has.
Yeah.
You know, because as a non-binary individual, their pictures, you know, are across a spectrum, and media is choosing, you know, certain pictures that play into an algorithm or into a narrative that works with whatever story is being published about them. And once again, and that's where I just kind of sit back and personally, you know, as someone who literally teaches about bias and rhetoric, you know, about ethos, pathos, and logos and all this other stuff, I'm just here going, wow, this is like a case study of like how an outlet or outlets present information and how you really have to objectively sit back and go, how is this even being presented before I could even start to digest what is being presented to me.
Well, like you can always tell, like I've been playing a game with like exactly what you're saying, where every time I see an article pop up, based on what picture of Ezra they use, I can tell you what slant the article takes on the topic. And that doesn't necessarily speak to the truth or falsehood of what the article is saying, so much as if I can look at the picture and tell you what the angle of the article is, then probably the article is not actually like founded in logic. It's founded in something else, because I shouldn't be able to do that. I should look at the picture and say, like, I don't know what angle they're going to take on this. Yep. Because it shouldn't be so upfront with the, like, this is who this person is. And it's like the same thing that, like Dave said, the groomers got a hold of it. Those are people who don't even know who Ezra is or don't care. They haven't been involved in any of this stuff. But it is now fuel for their existing debate on whether or not LGBTQ people are dangerous or are groomers. It's just fuel for that. And then in addition to that, it's like the same thing as you see with like the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. So much of that was about like it was seen as either a referendum on Me Too, or it was like hold the ground down for Me Too. And so you get stuff where people saying like, oh, she's an imperfect imperfect witness or an imperfect victim or whatever they called her, where it's like, oh, she might not be telling the truth, but she represents people who were telling the truth, and therefore it's important to take that seriously, and like not to get too deep into that and into that case specifically, or even take sides on it. But like that's fucked up to phrase anything that way. Like, yes, it's important that victims be taken seriously and be listened to, but not at the expense of the truth. Not at the expense of like if
just mocked at that fucking point.
Whether or not whether or not Amber was telling the truth or not has no bearing on how, like, if she's a good witness or a good victim. It's based on whether or not, like, it actually happened or she's telling the truth, and that should be what the question is. If the facts point to something that is inconsistent with what, like, oh, we want to take victims seriously. Yeah, taking them seriously doesn't necessarily mean like it's always true. It means we should always take it seriously and that we find out whether or not it's true or not. Don't dismiss it without looking at the evidence. And you should look and that, you know, and go down, all the way down. And not taking it seriously means saying, like, you know, not following up on reports, or not filing a rape kit, not, you know, all of that kind of stuff that, like, the law enforcement does all the time, where it just kind of brushes off claims. That's the problem. Taking it seriously doesn't mean that it's always true. It means that you follow the rabbit trails down to the end to get to the point where you say confidently, we can say, yes, this did or didn't happen. And like, so much, like, these cases come up and people are like, well, we don't care about the facts. We care about how this impacts whatever other narratives we're invested in.
Yeah.
And that's, like, a problem, because then you get people, you know, caught in the crosshairs of, like, this isn't even about grooming. This isn't even about the DCEU or the Snyderverse or anything. This is just about, like, whatever somebody's agenda is and how this fits into it. And it's like, it's so baffling to kind of see this stuff take off and be like, can we go back and like why we're not discussing, like, the body cam footage came out and it and in it Ezra says, but I was assaulted. I called you guys. And the guy that he's saying assaulted him says in the body cam footage, says to the cop, are you going to fuck him up or should I? And the cop says, oh, we're not fucking up anybody. And, like, none of that is mentioned in the police report. And, like, I don't know what the local jurisdiction is and whether or not you're required to file everything, but for the police report to come out and not mention that Ezra claimed they were assaulted, that the person that they were there on behalf of violently threatened Ezra, you know, that none of that stuff happened. And that doesn't mean Ezra is innocent, but, like, that's
still, like, assault.
Like, well, exactly. And it's like, how do you know, that doesn't absolve everything, but it does paint a very different picture based on how it was originally reported. But, like, no, that's not where the discussion is going. You go back and you look at the Yelp reviews for one of the bars that Ezra was at, that this all stuff happened with, and the Yelp reviews are full of, like, and not just, like, recently review bombed, but, like, over the years there have been, like, a whole bunch of claims on this bar's Yelp page saying that they're anti-LGBT and racist and all these other things, based on, like, multiple different, like, corroborated, like, similar experiences.
They don't like local. They don't like foreigners, even if whatever you are. Like,
Chris was on here and said that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. He basically said that even if you're just, like, showing up and you're a tourist, they don't like you. They like only locals, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's, you know, obviously there was an altercation, there was something going on. So to repeat myself, like, this doesn't, like, absolve everything, but it does take the conversation back to a similar place.
Context.
Like, this conversation never happened. The conversation of, like, what happened, let's look at the police report, let's look at the body cam footage, all of which is available, all of which can be compared. Like, why does the report not mention these things? Like, why do they say, oh, this person claimed Ezra assaulted them, but then doesn't say Ezra claimed they were, like, that's what the police do, is they show up and they write down what people claimed happened, what offenses people, because they weren't an eyewitness, right? So it's a witness account. It doesn't even say the defendant claimed they were assaulted.
Right.
It just says, like, the defendant wasn't cooperating, and then that's not shown in the body cam footage. Maybe it happened off body cam footage, totally possible and plausible, knowing the way Ezra is, that they may have been uncooperative potentially, but it's not in the, like, it's not corroborated. So it's like you've got to find a starting point for this besides, like, I'm sure it's 100% true plus some in every single instance, or you wind up in this area where it's like you're talking about kidnapping and running from the authorities, and it's like it's not even like a misrepresentation. That's a totally different reality.
So are you saying that a police report where they've taken a statement from somebody is not admission of guilt?
Yeah.
I just want to be clear, because I have no idea how the legal system works, and how that works. I was just curious.
Police report says an event happened, and this is what people claimed happened, and based on the way we categorize laws, these are where those things slot into.
It reminds me,
the words like assault mean something, and then after it's recorded in the police report, and the police says we believe assault happened, like there's probable cause at the scene, then there's a hearing later on. Maybe you get a jury, maybe it's just a judge, and they'll take witness statements, and then they'll do like what we're doing now, because like nobody else, did that. Or you've got, I don't know, charges will get dropped, or like that restraining order gets dropped, and like that's still, there's this snowball that's happening, and it's like collecting, like it's growing, and you're like, what is that's most of the snow on that is fake. Like, where is that even coming from? Nobody's like, like, slow down. It's just it
reminds me of years ago when I was a notary public, and people would come in and they'd want me to sign something, and they misunderstand what a notary public is. Like, they think that you're attesting to whatever, is in the document that you're signing, that it's truthful. And that's not the job of a notary public at all. You're just attesting to, hey, this person came in, showed me their ID. This person came in, showed me their ID. I checked it out as best as I could, and it looked like that they were the people who they said that they were.
And then they signed.
And they signed it. Like I would have people come in and say, well, this is it. I got subpoenaed to court one time, and like these people were asking me all these questions about it, and they're like, well, what about the validity of this? And I'm like, I don't know. That's not my job as a notary, is to say that the document is correct. My job is to say that, yes, they signed it. These people said that they were who they were, and it looked like it checked out. That's it. It's not that everything that's being said is absolutely factual or correct. This is their statement. That's why in those police reports you didn't have, well, as like I thought it was funny with the first one with the people in Hawaii, the restraining order says that he busted into the room and he says what do you say? He says, I'll kill you, or whatever, I'll bury you and your slut wife, right? And I know people don't like it, but it's like, I would say, well, there's more to that conversation, obviously, right? Because like usually even arguments
they've never spoken before in their lives.
Like that, like I'm just imagining Ezra
never heard of Ezra Miller, and all of a sudden he was in their room. He was pulling Robert Downey Jr.
He just pops in. I said, most arguments even don't start out as, hey, I'll bury you and your slut wife. Like you kind of have to get there, but like nothing in that report says, we said this, and then this
I've
was
only said it
once
or twice at a party.
That's a restraining order. Like, you can go down to the police right now and be like, oh, Steven violently threatened me on a stream. I want a restraining order against him.
Can I get one on William?
I know. I saw the super chat. Yeah,
I would, but I'm not worried about old men, attacking me. Especially of his age.
And they'll give it scrutiny. Like, you'll need to prove like some level of, like, I don't know, show them a clip of the stream or something, which I'm not threatening with this. But like, and then they'll grant it, and that's like, you are saying you wish for this person to not be near you, and so this is the police saying we respect that you don't want this person to be. That's all a restraining order does.
Yeah.
So the fact that one exists doesn't say anything other than the person who filed the restraining order didn't want Ezra near them. That could be because something happened. It could be because nothing happened. They could be sensitive. They could have a thick skin, and it was just really, really, really bad to the breaking point. Who knows? But like, to jump on that as a confirmation of anything other than just like somebody is claiming something is like just intellectually irresponsible.
Yeah.
And basically that restraining order just got thrown to nothing, and it was like, no, whatever the hell that.
That's something that Alex can probably speak to.
With prejudice. Yeah. With prejudice. We don't know what that means, but with prejudice, it sounds like that it was something like.
Yeah, and then the whole chair situation too. I mean, that was a whole different thing.
The chair situation. It was like the third, or I don't know, but Ezra was at a party, and once again, that's where the police report says, like, it's vague, but it says like a chair was thrown and it hit somebody in the head, and it left like a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch cut or something. No medical treatment was given or medical treatment was refused on the scene. So whoever got hit with the chair said, no, I don't need medical treatment, and no charges were filed at the time. So I don't know, can you look into that or not? People will get into car accidents or get into altercations all the time, and then like a day or two later be like, you know what? Looking back on that, I really should have pressed charges, and then they'll go do something about it. But like, I don't know. I've like done stuff like throw chairs at party that hurt people. Like, I'm not saying it's the same thing, but it's like one of those things where like there's a spectrum of meaning behind that, of like why do chairs get thrown? Why do people get hurt? Okay, it could be a targeted assassination attempt, or it could be like they were playing musical chairs and it got out of hand, right? Like, and where in there does it fall? I don't know, but that's why there's like that's something for like the law to decide, for us to wait for the law to decide, not to say like, oh, the report says a chair made contact with head, therefore it was intentional assault. The big thing with that one though was because there was harm done based on like negligence, is that the police report did file it as like second degree assault or something like that, which usually what happens in those cases is the police will find whatever the most extreme charges they can come up with at the scene. And so it's always going to be that at worst it was that, but usually ends up getting drawn back to something, less serious. And, I'm not going to defend throwing chairs at people, but like I said, there's so much
unless it's WWE.
There's so much missing context there.
Bring chair shots back.
I don't even know how to form a narrative around those. Like you draw those dots, like you need like what, 3 dots to make, or 2 dots to make a line. And like, I've just got like 1 dot that's like chair was thrown. And I don't know where the other dot is. Is the other dot like with malice, or is it like drunkenly? Was it like a joke gone bad? Was it like, was Ezra trying to put the chair away and just did it a bad job? I don't know. But like, how do you, there's like such a wide spectrum there we don't know who the person is or what their relationship to Ezra was or why they were at the party, because this is all personal stuff like that we aren't privy to, but like apparently like that one piece of information is enough for like a whole narrative. So.
Okay. So continuing on from that, I mean, we're kind of just going like, thing by, I think you pretty much kind of covered most of it right there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like I said, I'm only loosely going into details where appropriate, because I think getting lost in the weeds is almost the wrong way to, like, there are weeds to get lost in, but like I think that it's almost a disservice to get into like the he said, she said, they said of the whole situation, because like that's.
Well, I was going to say, for like the most part, when it comes to the whole kidnapping somebody on the run, I mean, they know where he's at, or they know where, they are at, whatever. Yeah. They know where, is that essentially kind of like the thing where it's like the whole thing about, that they don't like, he's on the run. I mean, or, what are we, what are we assuming when it comes to that? Like when that whole thing, the fact that headline is out there, and I had people arguing on my mentions on Twitter saying like, well, no, that's not true. And I even was like saying, yeah, Ezra is not on the run.
Well, it's almost true, but when you see like authorities and court and like what authorities, what court, like the people that can't find Ezra are people who, it's because Ezra is out of their jurisdiction to A, enforce the order, or B, serve the order. As is the person being that the order is supposed to protect from Ezra or isolate from Ezra, or whatever the exact situation is. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know enough about like tribal law to know what the different states will sometimes have, like if you get a speeding ticket in one state, other states will reflect it on their, like they'll share records and stuff, or they'll say like if someone flees from authorities over state lines, the authorities will have permission. So I don't know how that works in with like tribal authorities or tribal governments, but when it says like they can't locate Ezra, it does not mean that like there's a bounty hunt going on and Ezra is like hiding under a bridge.
I'm the dog.
Where's dog? Yeah, where is dog?
What that means is that Ezra is just not within their, like, they gave it to like not a notary, but like who was the people who serve papers?
Process server.
A process server. And they're just like, oh yeah, no, Ezra's like 1,000 miles away from here. I'm not going to drive and give it to him. And they're like, okay, well, if he comes back, you give it to him. And they're like, okay, cool. And then it's like, Ezra evading authorities. Like the people looking for him are probably sitting on their couch like right now. Like this is like looking for, like
there are also 2 things that happened before this one. The first obviously is the KKK video. So that whole thing was happening. And after that, it was someone, Ezra dated, named Mia Solange. So she's important because, she kind of plays into the vintage devil you know,
Yeah.
she has a
Well, because
cameo.
there were two, and that was one thing where like going back and as the story was developing, looking at like you start to identify like kind of players. And I think when we were on the stream last time, I talked about how like a lot of this feels like drama spilled over from Tumblr, but like on to, and like and that's really in a lot of ways what
Another
what it
band
is,
name, by the
'cause
way.
Drama,
Tumblr drama.
Tumblr drama.
And because one of the there were the Vintage Devil and Mia, I think, but it was pretty easy to find them early on because they were commenting on and kind of getting attention and traction from some of this stuff, and you kind of look at their history on their social media accounts and their interactions and whatever, and it becomes kind of apparent there's like a bone to pick there. And so there were at least two people who were stalkers, former lovers, wanted to be lovers, whatever, with Ezra, who started kind of stirring the pot. And whether or not it was just them or whether or not they had burner accounts or friends or whatever, but one of them used to run like a Tumblr Ezra Miller fan account, and I'm not sure who the other one, what the association was.
Mia was the person that Ezra that posted pictures with Ezra,
Right, I remember that.
sleeping in her bed or whatever. So they probably dated, but the fact that she admitted to hating Ezra and all that for like a week, she tried to spin that shit, and then it just died down. Nothing happened. She moved
Right.
on.
Well, there's been a whole series of those because the stalkers really jumped on the situation because they would amplify any of the news, but also throw out their own allegations and other stuff with whenever anything would happen, they'd jump on that for their existing like the Vintage Devil I saw way long before on Instagram for whatever reason, before any of this even happened, had a long running like claiming Ezra was copying their clothes. Like, they would post a picture on Twitter, and then Ezra would like show up to a show with their band wearing something that was the same color a week or two later or whatever. It was like I don't know enough details about it, but it was like that level of weirdness. And then they became very active on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, amplifying this other stuff. And whenever that kind of thing happens, you don't know, are there burner accounts involved or whatever, but there's definitely like a clear agenda that isn't only amplifying stuff, but also muddying the water with additional claims.
See, everything we just talked about, I have no clue what, like...
Yeah. Well, a lot of the
all
stuff
of that
on the radar
was happening.
But before we go on, Jordan, you're going to take off. You got to take off.
Yeah, it's 2 a.m.
Yeah, I know. It's late. It's really late for you. I know.
See you, Jordan.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, Jordan. Thank you for showing up, man.
Yeah, thanks for listening to me for so long.
This is the boss.
Yeah. All right, man. Take it easy.
See you, bro.
But I'm gonna hop out as well, gents.
Okay.
Matt,
See you, John.
Till
Thank
next
you, John.
Friday. Y'all take
For
it
sure.
easy.
Take it easy, John. Thank you.
All right, gents. Peace.
See you. All right.
And
There
that's
you
the thing, Scott, because all this information is only available if you go looking for it and research on every single incident and try to connect
And also care.
yeah.
Well, and
that
that's
was the big
that's
thing,
that's what's frustrating me about this, because look, on all the different platforms that I'm on, you know what I mean, is like I just search and respond to things on my social medias, right, that don't even have anything to do with this. Like I'm coming across obviously YouTube videos, I'm coming across articles, I'm coming across Facebook posts, I'm coming across TikTok videos, and I'm coming across all these things that it's like every single one, somebody said it earlier, I think in the chat, it's become a game of telephone where it seems like all these things are said and then somebody adds just one more thing. It just makes it sound a little bit more sensational because they want to get their thing read, right? They want to get their post read, or they want to get their article read. And so like what goes from like what Steven's talking about, that it's literally just like there's an explanation for this, turns into like we're acting like he's in a white Bronco running from the police, you know what I mean? Like, and that's
Like,
not what's happening. And then like I brought it up to a guy who did a TikTok video.
Using like TMZ is one of the big ones that's like Every time I
Oh,
read
yeah.
that, I'm like, really? Why are you saying that? And like they're really pushing it, but like even they don't use the word like kidnapping or anything like that. Is all
Yeah,
stuff that is
well-
cropped
well-
up on social media that is not even being reported or claimed.
I came across a guy like who like has you know, a YouTube channel or something like that, and he was talking about it. It was a TikTok video, and I just ran across it. So I was just like, I just pointed out, I said, well, this isn't true. And I said, you know, you need to do better research. And he's just like, well, every article I've read says this. And I said,
Yeah,
well,
but
that's the problem right now, is that these articles, like if you just look at surface level stuff and you don't do any other research or looking into it at all to see like what it means, you know. And I've had people try to tell me, you know, when the bar fight thing was going, I had a guy from Australia tell me, and I don't know if this is an Australian thing, but like he was trying to tell me, he was trying to make it out like it was an Australian thing. So I don't know. I got plenty of Australian friends and nobody else seems to corroborate this, but he was like, well, if you're in a barroom fight, you should go to prison. And I'm like, that's not how our judicial system works. Like we have, you know, innocent until proven guilty. Well, yeah, but it's stacking up, Enosh. It's stacking up. There's all this stuff stacking up. It's like, it doesn't matter what's stacking up.
if 100 people lie about you and say you're a
Yeah.
pedophile, that doesn't make you a pedophile. That just
And
makes
if people
100
see opportunity with a celebrity that they've come in contact with and maybe they've had issues with, like all of a sudden they make it sound worse and they see an opportunity maybe to get in on something. It doesn't make it real. It doesn't make it truth. You know, like you said, it doesn't matter if you have 100 accusations of people just stacking up on it. If it's not true, it's not true.
Well, it's like you see, like if there's smoke, there's fire, or there's a lot of smoke in here, and it's like, yeah, but that's
No,
not,
Draga.
It's like there's not a like smoke does not like, how do you know it's smoke and not steam? How do you know that like it's
Thank you, yes.
like there's so many questions that like. And the people, because it's the thing people say, or about anything. People,
Yeah,
about,
I've gotten
on
the
Twitter,
smoke is fire. Yeah,
and it's not even with
Wasn't.
Ezra though. You see that with other stuff where it's like, oh well, there's a lot of smoke. You can't say there's nothing happening, and it's like, but there's like I've personally seen before where I'll say something like when Birds of Prey was coming out, I heard something about like, oh, the studio liked the tests, but the audiences liked the tests, but the studio didn't like the test screenings as much or something. And I tweeted something about it offhand that wasn't really a outright scoop or anything, just like, oh, that's ironic. It figures that the studio would be like nervous about it when audiences are like, yes, give us this. And then like next thing I knew, it was being like circulated on Reddit, or like a bunch of like smaller blogs were like, oh, this person says this about Birds of Prey test screenings. And then like I would say something later on about, oh, well, such and such, whatever, about Birds of Prey. And then someone would be like, oh no, they tested it with internally they hated it and the audiences were all about it. And then I'm like, that is only information is circulating because like people blew it up when I said it offhand. And now it's being like you just seeing the way this stuff circulates, the amount of like research that goes in, like the fact that someone would cite that to me without knowing like that originated with me. Is the kind of like, that's the not that everybody, you know, everything that is said any time in your life has to have like a Wikipedia annotation or something, but especially with this stuff, it's like you have to go back to the like, what does the police report say? What is their, you know, there's Reddit pages that are devoted to those areas in Hawaii. There's hashtags that like, you can go and find people talking about this stuff from the area. You can find it being discussed locally. You can find, you know, Chris Wong was on here. He was telling us about what the environment is like. And then, but the way you get to this like kidnapping thing, the reason I was spent so much time on like the police reports and everything is because by the time you get to the like, oh, they're groomed and kidnapped someone, like the only reason that is even a story or is being talked about in that way is because everybody let the Hawaii stuff, which is like, Ezra just had a bad couple weeks in Hawaii, like comparatively to this other stuff that went down. Like, okay, so they got thrown out of a bar for being disorderly and like a couple times, and they got too excited at a house party and threw a chair and it hurt somebody. Like, that's not like a lifestyle I would encourage anyone to adopt.
Yeah.
But like, literally, as if anybody has not done that kind of stupid shit in their life that's like watching this or in the chat, like that's not serious stuff. It's not good stuff. It's stuff you try to avoid, but like, it's not this insane stuff. But when you take that, like that level of stuff and allow it to grow into this narrative, assaulting people all over Hawaii and all that stuff, well, then someone says like, oh well, grooming, and everyone is like, oh well, that's not much of an escalation from what we already. There's so much smoke. I don't doubt this either. And it's like, well, no, but
See,
that's
been telling you, like, look at all this time. There's just one thing after another. You
Yeah.
know, like he's guilty of everything. You know, like
The fact that the victim, Gibson or Takara, she is actively trying to, out her father as
Yeah, I was gonna
mentioned,
bring up Chase, right? Chase.
yeah, Chase Aronite, and apparently the new, the new thing, kidnapping and all that, that was also done by him, and he is, he has some sort of authority in his, community, so obviously he can pull some strings to do this, and the
Yeah.
daughter herself, they're saying this is happening
Yeah.
on Instagram. So why are TMZ not reporting this?
Right. Well, or Chase
because
Ironite
she looked
also-
like she was being controlled by
controlled,
Ezra. While she like
Ezra
this is
had a
what
good-
I've been saying. Like everybody who's like Ezra needs to come out and say something. Does he? Because everybody who comes out and says something in either defense of the situation or even Takata herself or Gibson himself, whichever you choose.
Their selves.
Yeah, right. Their selves.
Themselves.
Whoever comes out and says anything, it's going to be picked apart at this point because whoever doesn't believe them anyways is
Yeah.
going to find something. So if Ezra just came out and said, "Look, this is these allegations aren't true. We're going to go to court. We'll have our day in court." Oh well, you can't believe him, right? Look how he was looking or how he was acting while he was saying that or whatever. And people are just going to put they're going to fill in those dots, Steven, where you said those dots aren't there yet to actually triangulate and like figure out what's going on. People are going to put in their own dots just to make their own picture. So it's best that he's quiet.
Oh yeah.
You know?
But the best thing right now is for Ezra to be quiet. And I know there's like the new report that came out from Deadline, which everybody was talking about earlier, and it was just like, yeah, that's just whatever. We're talking about what's all happening here and all the players involved. And thank you for talking about Chase, because that was an interesting thing. And then of course, Enosh, you interviewed Vintage Devil, and I listened to that when he did too, and I, good job by the way. And I talked about it. I talked because obviously I had two streams that were Ezra centric, and I said, all right, listen to this stream right here because you broke it down, and she basically, put out BS, and then wanted to be like, whoa, shit, I fucked up. Now it's time to clear this stuff and the whole grooming thing and everything. And, I mean, she realized.
For the ignorant person in the room.
Yes.
Who is Vintage Devil?
Yeah. That's why I was getting at.
So
Enosh, go for it. Or Steven, whatever.
well, I'll say I don't.
No,
I'll-
Enosh.
Well, I will keep it very short because Enosh has something that I want to hear, and so as a result I'll keep it short. But I will say Vintage Devil was an Instagram account that I became aware of doing looking into some stuff related to the Flash, like in 2021, like long before this even happened, and it's a person that used to run an Ezra Miller fan account on Twitter, or not on Twitter, on
Tumblr.
on Tumblr.
Yeah.
And now they claimed that Ezra was stalking them and copying their outfits and all sorts of other stuff that was like, I don't know. I don't want to dismiss any, like the whole point of this is not to dismiss any claims outright, but it was a weird level of like, assumption of interest in Ezra, and we're very invested in like bringing down Ezra's reputation, but none of the stuff actually was like hard proven. It was all just these kind of loose, weird allegations of like, oh, I wore this on Tuesday, and then on the next Thursday, Ezra posted a picture wearing also
Similar
a red shirt.
colors.
And but so then as this other stuff came out, they really rode that wave of attention because Ezra was getting so much attention now that the negative things they were saying while Ezra was getting more traction. So that leads into what Enosh is going to say. Before you say that, I think it's really, having said all this stuff about like, let's believe Ezra, I also think it's important to say like, while this is very interesting and I don't want to say that I don't believe it because it seems plausible, it's all equally important that we don't just assume like, oh, well, she said that it was fake and therefore it's fake, because we've proven is that this person is saying things for attention and for motivated purposes. But it is an interesting step in the game that the person who was provoking these claims is now retracting them. So that doesn't necessarily mean the claims aren't true, but it does suggest that there is some motive and more scrutiny needed on the claims, instead of just saying like, oh, it's true, or oh, it's not true because they denounced it.
Yeah.
But that's where Enosh had a lot.
One thing, sorry, Enosh. One thing that makes me believe from the interview is that the person that she
Oh no,
the internet just cut out.
Okay, Enosh, go.
Go again. Your
Okay,
internet.
so
back.
Yeah, you're back. Go say what you're gonna say.
Yeah, sorry. So sorry. So yeah, the person they were conspiring with, they stopped replying. Like the Mia person that previously accused Ezra, they stopped replying to Vintage Devil, and this obviously caused some interruption there from that plan, and maybe this invoked some guilt in her as well. But even Chazar and I didn't reply to Vintage Devil. So I guess she was trying to manipulate with a lot of different players involved, but they all kind of ghosted her, and then she was left alone. And now she realized that she's probably doing the wrong thing, and that's why she admitted it. And I really liked that. Although it was shocking because she's been behind Ezra for years, and to admit that big of a lie, and that is a very huge thing. So that was very shocking to me, but appreciated, obviously.
Yeah. So, Scott. So Vintage Devil had some connection with Ezra. It's we don't know exactly how close they were. She seems to think that they were really close, and there may have even been some romantic things on her side or his side. It doesn't really matter, but she claims that she was mad at Ezra. She was willing to try to cause problems for Ezra, and so she contacted Chase.
Who's Chase?
So Chase is the father of Takata / Gibson.
Gotcha.
And
okay.
he's the one that is pushing the grooming
Yes,
allegations.
the grooming thing.
And these are all members of a Native American
Lakota
Yes,
Indian,
yes.
or Lakota
and so Vintage Devil reached out to him because Vintage Devil had been speaking with Mia, who was the girl who came out a couple of months ago on Instagram and was, talking about, that
Post
her
the
and Ezra were
pictures.
so close, was posting the pictures of them together, and
don't even know about that.
yeah. So
this
that was a couple months ago, and anyways, so Vintage Devil reached out to Chase and said, "Hey, talking to Mia, talking to people, so it's really messed up what Ezra did to your daughter, basically, in a nutshell," and said, he was grooming her, he was, inappropriate with her, blah, 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 got him fired up about that. And then that escalated. And from the interview that I did with her, she basically said she didn't think that it was going to explode that big. She didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal that he was going to then pursue legal matters and whatnot, because then the daughter grows up. She's 18 now. The accusation was that this had been going on since she was 12. There was an accusation also perpetrated that when she was 14, Ezra tried to get in bed with her. And when all this stuff started blowing up, Vintage has come out in the last couple of weeks and just said, look, none of that was true. I can't substantiate any of that. I made it up because I was mad. I was trying to get back at Ezra. I was trying to cause him problems with them, but it wasn't true. And so I agree with KC, like, to come out and basically put your reputation completely in the dumper. Like I said, I can't speak to whether or not it's true or not. I can't speak to, none of us can speak to whether or not any of this is true. And like Steven said earlier, this is not about, no matter how much some people want to make it out that us being cautious is somehow claiming innocence, that's not what it's all. It's not what it is at all. It's just simply looking for what actually happened, what didn't happen, and comparing those stories. And then, so now this is going to this tribunal because Chase is done this. Well, then people have called in and said, well, why would, if Chase knows that it's fake, why would he put his reputation? Because apparently he's very much part of some organizations that like they fight for water conservation and
well, that's how Ezra met them. Was if you remember
yeah,
all
yeah,
of the water
was doing
conservation stuff during
activist work.
Justice
Yeah,
League. Ezra was big on that and
Yeah.
protesting the pipeline.
yeah.
And so that's how Ezra got hooked up with the
Yeah, so
he's
doing
very into Lakota
activist
culture.
work, and
Yeah.
some people have painted this picture. Well, if he knows this, like like why would he, still do that? But apparently, he has wanted Dakota to keep, being a part of that. She's wanted to get free of all of that and be her own person and go off on her own. And now with her transitioning to Gibson, Gibson came out and made a video this last week saying my father is basically full of crap. This none of this ever happened. I'm trying to get free of this because they do not approve of my transitioning. That's where this is. They blame Ezra for my transitioning. So when this lie comes in, they're willing to just go with this and try to do anything they can to pile up on Ezra because they know that who's having legal issues as well. But there's tons of photos from from just a couple of months ago that shows Ezra. They're painting Ezra like that they've known that he was this monster for so long, but there's all kinds of like this documentation that shows that they were fine with Ezra. There's pictures that show like Chase with Ezra laughing and happy around New Year's and in January. And then there's this weird turn where the newspaper for the tribe or whatever wrote this article, and it just states everything as fact, that like this happened. But it doesn't really substantiate it, but it says that she was with Ezra and Ezra caused her to overdose on LSD, and then they wanted to come get her. Which by the way is
information like he wasn't there, so where did he hear that from? Like these are like every single one of these instances where like there's this claim. It's like, okay,
yeah.
Well, did Ezra tell them that? Did Gibson tell them that? Because if that was Gibson, then now Gibson is saying something different. Like, where did that information come from? Chase is making that third-hand or second-hand claim, and everything is being treated as like, well, Chase said it, therefore it's true. It's like,
and in court, that would be hearsay and wouldn't be admissible anyway.
Yeah. Hearsay. We heard that a lot.
So it's a bunch of that basically going around where this person said this person said this, and Ezra, they said that Ezra offered to get her medical attention or whatever, but they took her home, and but now she's 18, and they're fighting for custody of her. Or him, of them. They're fighting for custody of them, and then apparently there's this whole thing of a conservatorship, that has to do it. But they want to continue this activist, this thing, and so it's very much. But in all of it, Vintage Devil has said, look, I was with these people. Chase won't call me back, won't text me back. I have reached out to him. I've told him that it was not true. That I've explained to him everything that I've told everybody else about the situation. He won't respond to me, and he's continuing in this. And it was her feelings that he's continuing this because he
in for a penny,
really
in for
care.
A pound.
Yeah, it just it doesn't really matter at this point that if they're able to cause issue, they're going to do it, and that's her.
It's okay, guys. All they have to do is just reshoot it with Timothy Chalamet. That would just be, it would just like that. That's all you got to do. Because Timothy Chalamet, he weighs 97 pounds, and then he'll fit right into the Flash costume. Just perfect. Well, I love that part of it where it's like people don't really understand logistics of how the business is when it comes to all this stuff. And they're like, oh, you can just reshoot. It's fine. Everything's just fine. And it's like, I mean, do we all realize that WBD Now WBD is not exactly. It's not like they just have. Oh yeah, we have all this money we can just throw at things. No, they have. They had with this whole thing and the AT&T. They have a bunch of fucking debt. That's the thing. They have a shit ton of debt. So when like fans just go like, oh yeah, just reshoot that or just release that, it's like, hey, it's not that simple. It's really not that simple. And I love it when that all happens. And why is it always Timothy Chalamet? Like, can we get somebody who actually has shoulders?
It reminds me of like 2005 to like 2007, where every time anybody talked about a movie, it was like, oh, Chris Nolan or Peter Jackson or Joss Whedon, or like if you're like any geek would be like, oh, these are the people that need to direct like everything. Like, yeah. And it was very clear always that it was not related to like, oh, I'm experienced with their filmography and really liked it. It was like, oh, I'm a geek and I saw the Batman movies and there's nothing else like that. So I'm just going to say the guy that did those needs to do everything else. I love Nolan, obviously, but yeah,
he's waking up to it. That's great. That's great.
But is this somebody?
That's one of my haters. It is one of the posers who, fake pastor. Now he's waking up to because I said hi, Mark, in the chat. So he, of course, people must have been contacting him. That was not him earlier. So I retract it, Mark. It was not you, Mark, who was in
hi, Mark.
Fast pastor, who's done nothing but call me fake pastor, and you were echoing jar. I mean, that person was echoing statements against me, but no, go for it. I'm glad you woke up though. Hope you had a good night's rest.
I think Chase Iron Eyes is another interesting facet in the whole thing, also, because. You laughing at Chase Iron Eyes? Or you laughing?
No. I'm just laughing at like how ridiculous, because it took him a half an hour to figure out how he was going to address that I said hi.
Oh, okay.
Well, the jerk store called.
Good.
They're running out of you.
Once again, this is all like, I don't know, it's not all hearsay because it's also legal stuff, but like Chase Iron Eyes is an activist and has been involved in like various government on various levels of Native American or state governments, city governments, and so there's a little bit of a history. And as anyone who runs for office, there's like attempts to put dirt on them out there as well. And so, who knows what's all legitimate or not? But like Chase does have like a criminal background for burglary and theft, which is, I'm not going to hold. It's like a couple of years, like a decade or two ago, so I'm not going to hold like that against them necessarily, but there's other stuff that came out, like they would hold like they would do charity stuff. There was an Indiegogo that they did to raise money to install stoves at a facility, and they raised like $60,000, and then not the number of stoves that people expected were installed, and so they were like, what's going on with that? And when they asked Chase to provide accounting, Chase said fuck off, and told them, like, that's the article says quote unquote fuck off, and says that he didn't have to provide them any accounting for how the charity was handled because it was done through Indiegogo, and also, like, as they were in office, they had affairs with multiple women allegedly, but there's supposedly this journalist corroborated some of it. But the point is, like, in the same way that like Vintage Devil is like, okay, well, now Vintage Devil says that's fake, but that could also be attention seeking, right? That could be a good way to get back in Ezra's good graces, is to put this out there and then come in and be the savior. So maybe there's incentive for that also. So again, none of this is to say like anybody's right or anybody's wrong, so much as like, this is so much more fucking complicated than like, oh, it's kidnapping, cut and dry. Like, I keep on going back to kidnapping just because it's such a wild claim. But like any of the claims along the way, all of them can be pulled back like several degrees. And by the time you get to the end, you're like, oh, wow, that's like not nearly as like, people do far worse stuff than Ezra has actually been accused of doing all the time and are given a pass for it. The difference is their PR is handled better, basically. Like Ezra is a PR nightmare. I guess Ezra fired their publicist last year sometime at the end of the year, maybe. So maybe they're behind it. Maybe they're like, oh, I'll teach you to fire your publicist. But
Well, what also
like,
gets me personally is that it's not like that I'm ignorant of this kind of stuff. Like I'm part of this sphere, this orbit, but seriously, 90 to 95% of everything that you guys have talked about, probably in the last 45 minutes to an hour, I hadn't even heard.
Exactly. That's why we were doing this. Man.
I haven't heard it. It has not crossed my timeline, but I also haven't been engaged enough to actually like be invested that much in it because I have a life that I get my own shit I'm doing.
Well, and that's part of the like a lot of the people who are like, they need to do something, they need to take Ezra out of they need to recast, they need to whatever, all these things is all being said by people who like live in have no business sense or movie making understanding at all, primarily, but also like are living and breathing this stuff. Whereas Ezra Miller is not a household name. The movies Ezra is in aren't even necessarily household name movies. I mean, Justice League and like Harry Potter are popular, but like not like on that level, or specifically his roles are like not that popular. And so there's a level of like hyper exposure within a small community who is now like, this is the worst thing ever, when like you wonder, why has WB not said anything publicly? Why has there not been an official statement from Ezra? It's because the second WB says something, the second Ezra says something, the scope of like who is aware, it's just taking an amplifier and putting a magnifying glass on this and making more people aware of it. Like they haven't said anything because this is a thing that people like on Twitter are talking about. And so like, but there's this snowball effect of like, well, why haven't they said anything? Well, that must imply guilt. And then the snowball gets bigger. And then, well, now this claim must be true too, because why would, if it wasn't true, they would have said something. And now the snowball's even bigger. And then meanwhile, like Scott and normal people are out there, like not mad at Ezra Miller all day, every day, over this stuff. And so
Ezra doesn't even have social media that much, so people are not even following him for daily updates of the Flash actor and stuff like that. So nobody keeps up with this news.
And they're not even marketing the Flash movie yet. And like I know fans always love to think they're like the biggest, most important thing. But like if the official marketing for Flash hasn't started yet, that means like 95% of the people who are going to see the movie don't even know it exists yet. Like of the people that buy tickets for this movie, probably 95% of them don't know it exists yet, or maybe they don't know when the release date is. They know hypothetically it exists, but they don't know.
No, I wouldn't even say that, because I literally, like when I was talking earlier about going to see Lightyear yesterday, the babysitter who watched my 2-year-old literally discovered that Lightyear existed when I told her why we hired her and why she was watching my kid.
Yeah.
Like
and then you had to get another babysitter because she was like, I gotta go. I did not know this. And now that I know this, I gotta go. You're on your own, Scott.
But I think once again, but that's just, I mean, even that like blew my mind, just being like,
or lean into it. They'll lean into the controversy too a little bit. I mean, what was all, and what you said, Scott, you're right. Like most people don't even know I mean, if you said Ezra Miller, you just walked up to somebody, hey, you know who Ezra Miller is? They'd be like,
no, they wouldn't. I mean, I've had conversations with people about the Amber Heard. People have mentioned the Depp Heard trial, but once again, that's because that was on TV. Like, it's really, it is like one in 100 where shit that I'm following with you guys, I have a conversation with someone who's not you guys.
Yeah.
Like that is the kind of stratosphere that we live in with this kind of stuff, where it's like I'm usually the one informing my normies about what's going on. Like people people don't even know movies are coming out. Like we follow marketing material for like 6 months, a year. Literally, a movie can come out that week, and your average person, like when I say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go see a movie tomorrow," oh, that's a thing coming out, and I'm like,
right.
No, it's crazy.
Okay.
It's crazy.
Or their
It is
first
great.
person will be the first official trailer.
Yeah.
They don't
And-
even see that
and-
because so many people don't even go to the movies anymore.
Yeah, and we say this, like, I feel like we talk about this in some capacity almost every week that I'm on the show, but like I feel like it can't be said enough because I don't know if it's because fans want to feel important or because they're just surrounded by the stuff so much that they can't contextualize what the reality is for like other people. But like when I say 95% of the people who are going to see the Flash, like who are going to end up buying the tickets for the Flash, don't know it
For
exists
Michael
yet.
Keaton.
Like that is not that is not hyperbole when I say that. It might be an overestimation, but it's not hyperbolic. Like the people who know about the Ezra stuff now are such a small fraction of the people who are going to see the movie, and they're all going to see it anyway. The
Even if to hate watch it.
yeah, exactly. But even that they're not the people that like the studio needs to worry about. Right now, what the studio needs to worry about is the people who have no context for who Ezra is or what any of this is. That's why like the people seizing on the like, ooh, a not straight actor is accused of grooming, because like that's gonna get that into like those dinner table conversations in those social circles where like they don't know any of this stuff. They don't know the difference between Marvel and DC. They don't know whatever. They just know that like there's this thing that fits their political argument.
Yeah.
And if WB were to like release a press release and be like, we stand in Ezra's corner, or we reject Ezra, or if they were to, if Ezra were to release a statement, all those people, not all of them, but a lot more of those people who have no idea what this is, what's going on with this. Like Scott is so plugged into this stuff, and that's his level of familiarity. So imagine like how many people who don't even tweet about DC or movie stuff daily, know about this, and is going to put it on their radar all of a sudden, and they're lacking the context. They don't know who these people are. They assume that everyone in Hollywood is a pedophile. So you tell them that another person in Hollywood is also a pedophile, they'll be like, okay, yeah, sure. You show me a picture of them. Oh yeah, they look like Marilyn Manson. I'm sure they did it. Like, and then it's like it's like done for, because like there's no recovering from that narrative after that point, because that's nobody ever reevaluates the stuff or understands what's even happening.
No, that's true.
The funniest thing about this, and we can, if you want, Dave, you can get into that article, but the funniest thing would be the fans saying, drop the Flash movie, just dump it, we don't need it and all that. But like Steven, you said, 95% of people are still going to go watch it. And that's when the trailers start and the marketing starts. All this stuff will not even be known. So WB can just, normally market the movie without having the actor maybe in the marketing, and then release it and be successful.
Yeah, they're gonna probably push Michael Keaton big time in the marketing.
Well, if Ezra can keep their head down long enough to, and it's not even all about Ezra's head because people are bringing stuff up in there, but if somehow things can stay mostly quiet for like a few months, there's like, remember this entire conversation that we've had, everything that we've said here, like Ezra hasn't spoken yet. Ezra's got friends who are on social media who are saying stuff, but like there has been no defense yet. The narrative as it is now is the narrative as that's how much like this is a fire with no water in the vicinity, right? And this is like, sure, I'm making a big deal about how much it's spread, but like all things considered, like there's no counter narrative yet. So if things can die down enough, there is a counter narrative. There is another side to the story. Will that other side of the story change people's opinion? Will it reveal information that's sufficient? Is there evidence? Ezra was supposedly filming stuff that happened at these bars where they claimed that they were assaulted. So maybe there's something more out there, and we'll get more of that eventually. But I think it's very key to remember that like the perception that everybody has right now is based on exclusively one account of what happened in each of these instances, which is mostly hearsay, and a few things that are kind of a counter narrative, which are also hearsay, right? And so the amount of things that like anybody actually knows about anything is really minuscule. And so if things can stay quiet to the point where like if Ezra were to come out now and release their side of the story and video evidence of whatever happening, and then like tomorrow morning Chase Iron Eyes accuses them of killing Gibson or something weird, crazy like that. And Gibson is like on their social media, like, I'm not dead, I'm fine. And people are going to be like, oh,
I'm not dead yet. You
Ezra-
will be.
Ezra made them record that last week so that they could, like, whatever. But then everything that Ezra had put, or WB or whoever had put out in a statement, is now like null and void. It's like you just wasted that because now there's more drama snowballing on that snowball that I've been talking about.
No.
Whereas if things can die down, and assuming Ezra is legitimately innocent, there is a narrative surrounding this that, in a really cynical Hollywood PR way, could actually be a really great comeback story related to the Flash about sticking through adversity. And like, I'm sort of joking, but like,
Pulling lines from the Joker.
There's a Vanity Fair interview with Anthony Breznican in here about how Ezra handled this whole situation, and got through depression and all of these different things that they'll tie into the Flash, and will, provided this is all true. I don't think you can paint that picture if all of it's bullshit. If it's like, oh, here's a puff piece, oh, and this court just found them guilty of cannibalism or whatever. But like, if the evidence supports the narrative, this is not impossible to come out of, and arguably could even be a boon for the Flash marketing and stuff, provided Ezra is not seriously on the wrong side of too much of the accusations.
No, I mean, well, I like what William has to say is like, in a year, nobody will care. I mean, it's almost like, I mean, with everything that's been happening and everything that's happened with Ezra, and there's been little things that people have said too, of like things happening in his personal life that maybe not have been mentioned in the media. That, I mean, and a lot of people are just going like, he needs, help. And from what some of us gathered, as Ezra is receiving help. And then of course, what I keep on seeing too, which sucks, is like, when are they going to say something? When are they going to say something, like WB and blah, blah, blah. I mean, obviously we had that Deadline article that came out as we were live, or as we were about to go live. And it just like came out, and there's all that the stuff in there, and it talks about Dave Zaslav, which that's a whole other thing. I mean, probably do a video about it tomorrow or something. I don't know. Who knows? I'm kind of just like, it's kind
of what you do, Dave.
I know it is what I do, but at the same time, I'm like, can I get a break for a little bit? Can I just have a Saturday? I have to clean my apartment and go to my house warming, huh?
That article doesn't even have any quotes from WBD.
Yeah, it's all just
it's got unnamed. It's editorial.
Yeah.
What I read, because I read over a few paragraphs, and what I saw was unnamed sources and editorializing from Deadline. So that's two things that, after years of doing Squadcast and learning how to read articles and going, okay, because like I saw, because I found it looking at my Twitter timeline, because everyone's citing Deadline and saying, well, Warner Brothers Discovery reportedly, there's an important adverb there, reportedly has no plans after the Flash.
But reportedly, Henry Cavill's been fired about 6 times too.
Yeah,
but also reportedly has no plans after the Flash. From my experience, that's because the Flash hasn't come out yet. Hollywood tends to be very short-term thinking. They're going to wait to see what the Flash movie does traditionally before they make plans after that.
And it's not the MCU where they know that, hey, people are going to go see this, so we got to plan like 4 or 5 movies ahead. DC is kind of just going, we're going to see what the hell is happening. And even like their slate got rearranged. We're to the point where apparently, Michael Keaton had to reshoot some stuff for maybe possibly Aquaman. I don't know. It's just all kinds of stuff, and there's all that aspect, and it's
I haven't read the article yet, but based on what I'm seeing people say, I'm going to do a little bit of psychic, like the same way that I look at the picture and can know what an article says about Ezra. Based on the claims that I've seen, have you read it, Scott? The whole thing, or just skimmed it?
The Deadline article.
Yeah,
I've skimmed, like I said, about the first 3 or 4 paragraphs.
because my assumption, based on what I've seen, is that it says Ezra Miller is not attached to any upcoming projects, which is not necessarily. And then people are taking that as a, like, that doesn't mean Ezra was on projects that Ezra was then removed from. That just means there are no projects currently, and I would doubt that they're going to greenlight any. While this is all going on, so that means. And like I know deadline is a trade, and like so it deserves the respect of trades. But I, as a general rule, like something will break on deadline, and I know like okay, the headline is true, but I will always have to wait for like THR or whatever to go through the body because the details not just necessarily are missing, but like the context isn't always there for like, well, what does this mean when it says they're cast? Is that recent or was that past or is that they're in talks? Does that mean like whatever? I always find more info in the other one, so. Not to say that deadline is like lying, but like I'm definitely not saying that. But there tends to be the context for information isn't always presented in a way that is clearly understandable to me, at least. Also, they're the ones that I'm pretty sure it was Deadline that when the Joss Whedon claims that were happening surrounding when Shiraz wrote that article for Forbes, and then Forbes and Shiraz.
Was it in the wrap?
Was it the wrap? I thought it was Deadline that was the one that pointed out that Shiraz ran Comic Book Debate, and they cited his review.
Oh, yeah.
They were like, in his review of Man of Steel or Batman v Superman or whatever, he described Snyder's work as quote unquote masterful or whatever, as a way of discrediting what Ray Fisher told Shiraz in an article that was published on Forbes. But it was a weird thing of like, okay, why is that even? So I don't know.
Okay, Stephen. By the way, so not the headline is being generated by a part of the article, not even in quotation marks, from a unnamed source. This is from the author of the article, and the line says, I'll just read the sentence. In Zavzov's plan to make DC an explosively successful division like Marvel under his newly structured studio with its own new boss, the non-binary identifying Miller, we hear is simply not a part of those plans going forward in the future universe, regardless if there are more allegations or not. That is what's generating the headline. And once again, none of that is even, there's even quotation marks in the same paragraph from an unnamed studio source.
So,
but none of that is in the quotation marks.
So let's talk about the talk behind the talk here is when you see a quote like that in an article. So there's a couple different things that could mean. Maybe on one hand, the most extreme situation is Zaslav told Deadline directly, I will not hire Ezra Miller for any future projects, no matter what happens. Ezra Miller is done, never going to be in another DC movie under my leadership. And that's the way they wrote it. So that's one possible series of events that could have resulted in that sentence. Another is they asked a studio source and said, are there plans for Ezra Miller in the future of the brand right now? And they say no. And they say, will that change depending on whether or not there's more allegations? And they said probably not. Like, that's not the biggest factor in whether or not we're doing anything right now. And that means that same sentence applies to both of those scenarios. That's not to mean that it's necessarily one or the other, but that's a broad enough spectrum of potential meaning that, like, what the fuck does that sentence even mean?
No, that means he's fired, Steve. He's fired.
But that's also the most obvious route, right? Because, obviously, whether or not Ezra's more stuff comes out, he kind of is risky for business right now, especially if you are, trying to get a whole new project, especially a solo movie. Like The Flash 2 was kind of being rumored a while ago. And if that was in the plans, then now definitely they won't go with it, because right now he already shot the movie and the movie is in post-production and he's doing all this. So, you know, if he goes into a project from the start, it's definitely risky for them. So business wise, it makes complete sense that they wouldn't keep bringing him back. But also,
Well,
But and the article itself in the previous paragraph ends on the point of bringing up the fact that the studio removed Johnny Depp as Grindelwald for Fantastic Beasts 3 and replaced him with Mad
by the way,
Wilkinson.
which was
Yeah.
based on things that were determined in a court and things that
Right.
were decided by a judge. He was not removed from Grindelwald based on allegations. He was removed based on findings from a judge.
right. And
from
also
the,
at the
from
end
the
of the
UK
article-
from the UK
Right,
trial,
but it
right?
was
The
still a
UK
judge.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know
it's still
people even take issue with that, but the point is there were allegations out there about Johnny Depp for a long time, and they were and he was in movies. It
Yeah.
wasn't, and so like when we're talking about Ezra, it's like you can't. It's not apples to apples to say like, well, they should give Ezra the same treatment. Let there be trials and find out who's responsible. I will say like if Ezra is innocent of this stuff, there's a hell of a libel case
Yeah.
to be made, considering all of this stuff and the people putting it out there. If Chase Iron Eyes is lying, or if that doesn't pan out, there's libel there. The Vintage Devil is admitted to it. So I, not to discourage them from speaking the truth, but that's kind of a interesting situation that's been publicly stated. Like I started this rumor. But that's very different. It's not the same.
Yeah, on top of not having any quotes in this article, there's also, the last paragraph that says that WBD has declined to comment. So basically, they did not give any official statement yet.
Right.
No, they didn't. I know. That's what I saw, somebody in the chat say, like, hey, he was fired. You look, he's fired. And I even got someone sending me. It's like, he's fired.
Well,
it's like, where does it say fired? There's
and once
nothing
again,
that says fired.
The article, like this is the same
Amber
thing.
Heard
The same
shit,
thing
too.
as we've been talking about all night. There are no announced projects with Ezra Miller attached after
Yeah.
The Flash. Therefore, there is nothing to be fired from. And
Yeah. You
as-
sign a contract and
you
the
follow this
contract.
stuff for like, it only takes a couple years to follow the cycle of movie releases. That
There
like,
are also no new projects starring Inash V for for Warner
well, you know what?
Brothers,
There are
which
no
is a
new.
crying shame. I'll just say that crying shame, Zaslav.
What, you were fired?
I don't want to say I was fired, but there may have been some disagreements. Some things said. Exchanges, glances across a boardroom. Some were nice. There was a couple of raised eyebrows and maybe a wink or two, but apparently I'm not coming back with prejudice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like even if there were plans for Flash 2 and Ezra was attached or not attached, nobody's going to talk about that until like the Flash is out. Like, and that this is not a new thing. Like, follow a couple marketing cycles for any movie. They hold all the sequel stuff. It's like, oh, I don't know, we could do a sequel, and the movie comes out after it breaks $300 million or whatever their threshold is, and they're like, oh, and we've got a sequel in the works, and Ezra's coming back or somebody else is coming back or whatever they do. But like they don't, and that's why like it was weird and a problem for them, but just to show like how uncommon it is. That's what was happening with Justice League, where the reports were coming out beforehand, where it's like Ben Affleck is done as Batman and all that stuff. And that's exactly why they don't announce this stuff ahead of time, is because the news about Affleck not being Batman in the Batman movie anymore came out before Justice League came out, and that really hurt. That news hurt Justice League. It gave us a sign of weakness. So like, regardless of what the situation is, like Ezra Miller is not attached to any future DC projects. That is going to be status quo until at least after the movie is out, no matter if they're cleared of all charges or guilty as hell. They're not going to announce if WB were to say Ezra Miller is done, then they're going to scrap the movie. They're just going to throw it in the trash and say forget it, fuck it, we're not doing it anymore. If Ezra is hired for more, they're also going to wait to say that until after the movie is out. And so, this article doesn't say anything different. All the article says, per the quote from Scott, is there are no future projects with Ezra Miller. So, once again, like, go back to the, I don't know. I'll just say the same thing over and over and over. Get a clip of me saying, like, what was actually said.